The haunting of the Monarch Hotel. Tucked between the glimmering signs and retro charm of old Fremont Street in downtown Las Vegas stood the Monarch Hotel, a relic from the city's post-war heyday. While its faded neon sign still blinked half-heartedly in the desert night, the building's best years were decades behind it. Danny, a traveling photographer, was drawn to places like this, spots where the glamour of the past clung stubbornly, even as time chipped away at their edges. He had heard rumors about the Monarch during his last visit to Vegas. Locals whispered about strange noises, ghostly sightings, and guests who checked out abruptly, swearing they'd never return. But Danny wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. To him, the Monarch was a treasure trove of vintage character waiting to be captured on film. The lobby was eerily quiet when he arrived. The front desk was manned by a tired-looking clerk in his 60s who barely glanced up from his newspaper. The whole place smelled faintly of mildew and stale tobacco. "You're staying?" the clerk asked, his voice flat. "Yeah," Danny said. "One night. Room with a view if you've got it." The clerk snorted. "Only view you'll get is of the parking lot. Room 508. Elevator's slow, stairs are faster." Danny grabbed his key, a real metal one attached to a cracked plastic tag, and headed to the elevator anyway. It groaned as it ascended, the kind of sound that made you wonder if you should have taken the stairs after all. Room 508 was at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. The patterned carpet was threadbare in places, and the wallpaper curled at the edges. The room itself wasn't much better. The bedspread was a sickly shade of green, the furniture mismatched and dated. But Danny wasn't here for luxury. He dropped his bag on the bed and pulled out his camera. Sunset had turned the city's lights into a kaleidoscope of color, and from his window he could see the glow of Fremont Street flickering in the distance. As he framed his first shot, a sound made him pause. A faint tap, tap, tap echoed from the ceiling above him. He frowned and glanced up. "Old building," he muttered, dismissing it. Later that night, as he was reviewing his shots, the tapping returned, louder this time. It seemed to travel, moving from the ceiling to the walls. Danny set his camera down and listened. It almost sounded like footsteps. Creaky pipes, he told himself, though he couldn't quite shake the unease creeping up his spine. Around 1 a.m. he decided to call it a night. But as he lay in bed, the noise continued, scratches and faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Then a sudden bang. Danny shot upright, his heart pounding. The noise had come from the closet. He grabbed his phone for light and approached cautiously. His hand trembled as he pulled the door open. Nothing, just an empty closet. As he turned away, he caught something in his peripheral vision, a faint outline in the mirror above the dresser. A figure standing behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. "Okay enough," Danny muttered, grabbing his camera. He wanted proof, something to validate what he thought he'd seen. He snapped a few pictures of the room and reviewed them on the camera's screen. The first few shots were normal, but then he froze. In one of the photos, the closet door was wide open, though he had closed it. And inside, barely visible, was the silhouette of a woman. Her face was obscured, her form blurred, but the image was unmistakable. Danny felt the air grow colder. His breath came out in short, visible puffs. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The sound of footsteps echoed again, this time closer, tap, 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 moving toward him. His camera flashed involuntarily, illuminating the room in brief bursts. In one of the flashes, he saw her. A woman in a tattered evening gown, her face pale and gaunt, eyes hollow. She stood at the foot of his bed, her lips moving silently, as if whispering. Danny bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock as the air seemed to thrum with unseen energy. Just as he wrenched it open, the whispering turned into a scream, a high-pitched, otherworldly wail that sent him stumbling into the hallway. He didn't stop running until he was outside, the cool desert air filling his lungs. The next morning, Danny returned to the Monarch to retrieve his belongings. The front desk clerk gave him a knowing look as he handed over his camera bag. "Not the first to leave early," the clerk said. Danny didn't respond. He drove out of Vegas that afternoon, vowing never to return. Weeks later, while reviewing the footage he'd captured, he found one last photo he didn't remember taking. It showed his room empty but for the figure of the woman standing in front of the window, staring out at the lights of Fremont Street. Her reflection in the glass was smiling,